Lady Jane Grey had no idea that she was to become queen when her cousin Edward, Henry VIII's only legitimate male heir, had died at 15. She was terrified. She fell to the floor and began to weep uncontrollably. "The crown is not my right, and it pleases me not. The Lady Mary is the rightful heir." One of Edward's final acts was removing both of his sisters, Mary and Elizabeth, from the line of succession, giving it to Jane because of his elder sister Mary's Catholic faith. And when Jane was told all of this, Mary and Elizabeth had no idea that their younger brother had died. Her new father-in-law, John Dudley, the first Duke of Northumberland, who had led the government for the now late king, and who also had helped him arrange the new succession, told Jane, "Your Grace does wrong to yourself and to your house." Jane finally capitulated. And for 9 days, Jane became Queen of England. Mary didn't recognize this act and rode into London with 800 nobles and her sister Elizabeth by her side to take the throne of England as her own. Jane was an unfortunate pawn in the scheming for power by the men around her. Mary knew this, so instead of executing her cousin immediately, she arrested her and put her in the gentleman jailer's apartments, and her husband in the Beauchamp Tower at the Tower of London. Several months after they had originally been arrested, a trial was held by a special commission. Both Jane and her husband were found guilty of treason. Her sentence was to be burned alive on Tower Hill or beheaded as the Queen pleases. The early months of Mary's reign were fraught with uprisings and mass unpopularity. Plots began to surface to try to overthrow Mary and put her sister Elizabeth on the throne. And although the intention was never to put Jane back onto the throne, she had become a liability that Mary could no longer ignore. Mary first offered to spare both Jane and her husband's lives if they would convert to Catholicism. Staunch Protestants, they refused. Jane also refused her husband's request to see him one last time, as she felt it would be too difficult to bear. On the cold morning on the 12th of February, 1554, at 10 a.m., her husband, Guilford Dudley, was taken to Tower Hill and executed. Jane was able to see her husband from her window as he walked to his end. He was executed on the very same place both his father had been executed just 6 months previously, as well as his grandfather some years before that. It was only a few minutes after Jane's husband's execution that Jane saw his headless body being taken to the chapel. She cried pitifully, "Oh, Guilford! Guilford!" It was now Jane's turn. Jane received a private execution on the Tower grounds. Jane solemnly addressed the crowd. "Good people, I am come hither to die, and by law I am condemned to the same. The fact indeed against the Queen's Highness was unlawful, and the consenting thereunto by me, but touching the procurement and desire thereof made me, or on my behalf, I do wash my hands thereof in innocency before God and the face of you, good Christian people, this day." She then knelt down and read Psalm 51 in her prayer book, handed her gloves and handkerchief to one of her ladies, the prayer book to the lieutenant of the Tower, and finally, her gown, headdress, and collar to her ladies. The executioner knelt down to her and asked her forgiveness, which she gave. He then asked her to stand, which doing, she saw the block. She requested that her executioner dispatch her quickly. She also asked the executioner about what might happen. "Will you take it off before you lay me down?" He answered, "No, madam." She was then blindfolded. It is said that she grasped for the block in fear and cried out, "What shall I do? Where is it?" She was assisted in putting her head on the block and spoke her final words. "Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit." The axe fell. Jane was 17 years old. Her body stayed laying at the scaffold for several hours after her death. Lady Jane Grey was buried somewhere beneath the altar of the Tower's chapel.